Let's talk about SEO, search engine optimization, and what is it that makes your articles rank well in Google?
Just want to take this opportunity, really extend my gratitude to the press associations that we're working with on this. This webinar is a co-production with Our Hometown and these many state and national associations. I just want to thank each of them. The state associations, Ohio, New England, especially Virginia Press Association. We've been working with them a lot this year on their new digital initiative for association members that have no website or a weak website presence, and we're quickly getting them up to speed. Also, Kentucky Press, we've worked with him for years, the Pennsylvania News Media Association, Kansas Press, Illinois Press, and of course, America's Newspapers and the National Newspaper Association. We'll be working with them throughout the year to produce many more webinars like this, so I hope you'll check those out as well. Thank you again for joining us for today's live webinar on SEO for newspapers. This is the first in the 2022 Digital Marketing Webinar Series brought to you by Our Hometown, where we produce WordPress websites for newspapers. And it's also produced in partnership with all these wonderful state and national press associations. My name is Matt Larson, and I'm the president and CEO of Our Hometown, and I'll be your host for today. We will be taking questions from the audience, and we already have many submitted, but we're going to answer them all at the end of the presentation. So please take a minute, locate the chat box, just type a quick hello if you don't have a question yet, just so that I know you all know where that is. And just tell us how you heard about the webinar, if you don't mind. So let me get right down to it. Today, we have a very special guest speaker and presenter, Michael Cottam. He is the SEO speaker and consultant. We've worked with him for years. He's done wonders to help us optimize our WordPress platform, as well as, even more importantly, develop a playbook for newspapers where they can just step-by-step get the most out of every major social network. The goal of that is to maximize both traffic from those networks and also improve your ranking on Google, because Google is paying attention to all these social networks. They all kind of play off each other, and we'll hear a lot more about that today. So without further ado, Michael, welcome to the webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate you having me here. Let's get started. So I've been an SEO consultant for, I think, since 2009. So 13 years, and 8 years before that, I had a honeymoon travel company. That's kind of where I went to school in SEO. Sold that off in 2008 and became a Moz associate, which means I spoke at MozCon, helped beta test products, write for the main blog, do Whiteboard Friday videos, that sort of thing. What we're going to talk about today, first of all, a quick overview of some of the acronyms you've heard before we dive into and focus mostly on SEO and SMM. When people say search engine marketing, they're talking all the kinds of online marketing that has to do with search, not necessarily ads on their websites, but ads in Google and Bing and Yahoo, things like that. PPC is pay-per-click. That's most of paid search is pay-per-click. There's not very much, cost per thousand, cost per million kinds of ads anymore. SEO, people sometimes call that organic search, and that's basically where you do the right things to your website and to links to your website and social media to get Google to show you in search results without you having to pay Google. And SSM, social media marketing, covers both paid and unpaid, so just your followers seeing stuff you're posting, or maybe you're boosting stuff and targeting different audiences. And of course, Google's been in the news a lot lately, and Facebook about that and about privacy concerns, and lots of changes coming in the next couple of years on that. So let's talk about a little bit about Google. Google's got their fingers in a lot of pies here. And so a lot of people seem to think that, if you're buying Google ads, it's going to help you rank better in organic search, but it's not really true. The one little kind of side note to that is if you have an ad for a search term and you're showing up in the organic results, that can improve the click-through rate on that organic result. It's just kind of like more exposure makes you more likely, you seem to be a bigger deal on that page if you're mentioned a couple places, and you find click-through rate goes up a bit. But Google is not changing how they rank you in the search results based on whether you're spending money with them, no matter how much you're spending. Let's talk about social media buzz. And Google for a long time has said, no, we're not really looking at that. Yet Google gets the Twitter feed. Google is definitely crawling all the Facebook timelines out there. The reality is that if you do enough promotion on social media, that's a signal to Google that whatever that piece of content is or your website in general is popular, and that absolutely does affect rankings. I've seen lots of cases where websites that don't have the other signals like super strong backlinks, things like that, that they should need to get on page one for a competitive term, will start showing up just because there's a lot of buzz going on about them on Facebook or on Twitter or Pinterest or something like that. So it's pretty clear Google is monitoring the buzz on some core platforms. And if there's a lot of action going on there with links back to your site or links to a particular story on your site, that is going to impact rankings. Talk briefly about pay-per-click. In general, you're going to see up to 4 ads at the top of Google. And sometimes, and this started maybe 2 years ago, sometimes you'll see an ad inside what they call the local 3-pack. And the 3-pack, and I'll show you examples of it in a little bit, but the 3-pack is where you're going to get a map with some push pins on it, usually 3 results in there, and review stars for each of those 3 results. And so that's a different kind of search result than the regular 10 organic results you normally see. So you could get 5 ads on the page. So 4 at the top, 1 in the 3-pack. And then if it happened to be something that brought up something like a shopping carousel, then those are all paid as well. So having pay-per-click ads out there might be useful to you if you've got a new section that you're trying to build some awareness of. And maybe you don't have lots of links to that from other websites yet, and you want to, maybe it's a entertainment section or a local business section or something like that. Example, let's say you created a new high school sports section on your website, and you want people to start coming to the website to see what the scores were for the games, things like that. You can get that ad at the top, start getting people clicking through, and then maybe they're sharing on Facebook and things like that to help you get in the organics on page 1. Let's talk about SEO, search engine optimization, and what is it that makes your articles rank well in Google. So since day one of the strongest ranking signals Google's had is links to the page and links to your site overall from other websites. The reason Google is so hot on this is they treat that as a popularity indicator. So if lots of different sites link to your site, you must have some good stuff worth sharing. Same thing with an individual page. There must be some great stuff on that one page if lots of people are linking to it. And it's not a democratic kind of voting. It's if you have a very strong trusted site, or somebody else has a very strong trusted site, and that site links to you, that carries a lot more weight than somebody's weak little personal blog linking to you. The quality of the content helps impact ranking. And this is kind of new since maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Google's really upped their game in terms of how they can analyze what's on the page, whether the text on the page is covering a topic really thoroughly, or whether it's just spitting out the same keywords over and over again. The images, if you're using stock photos or using the same kind of placeholder photo for every page about, local police news, you use the same picture of, the light bar on the police car, like our local newspaper seems to do. Google knows when you're repeating those images, or if you got it from a stock photo library, and you don't get any brownie points for that. If you've got an image on the page that Google has not seen before, has maybe only seen a couple of places, maybe in Pinterest and Facebook, but not other websites, you get some bonus points for that. And embedded video is a big signal to Google of quality content, simply because they know that lots and lots of people out there are lazy and they would much rather listen and watch to consume a piece of content and learn something than to read. So if you've got video embedded in a page, that's going to help you rank. The headline and the page title are pretty key. The page title is what shows up as the headline in the search results, if Google shows you in the search results, and it's what shows up at the top of the tab in your browser. And it's not always the same as the headline that shows up near the top of the page in the content itself. That's what's called the H1 heading. Now, WordPress by default is going to make those the same, but it's quite possible to tweak them. And we'll talk a little bit later in this presentation about what you might want to do with that, why you might want to make those different. Social media sharing, I talked about that just a minute ago. If Google's seeing buzz about a particular page, that's going to help you rank. And later in this presentation, I'm going to talk about the difference between regular organic search results and organic search results that's on the news tab in Google, because it's not the same thing. So let's talk about headlines. So this is a very clickbaity headline. It's supposed to be catchy and get people to want to reshare and things like that, which it probably would do. And it's funny and it's cool and things like that. But if you want this article to rank, people aren't searching for any of those words. And the search terms that you want your story to rank for, you want to have in the page title. You might have a headline showing on the page that looks like this, but if you want this page to rank for, Celtic versus Inverness or whatever the article's about, then you need to make that the main headline in the page title. Now, having said that, if you've got a really catchy headline like this, and you want to put that in the heading in the middle of the page, but not the page title, that's okay. Google mostly is going to look at that page title to figure out what that page is about. They generally are only going to look at that H1 heading if they decide that the page title is inappropriate for the search term. It doesn't have any of the same words, and maybe the H1 heading does have the same words the person typed in. Then they'll sometimes switch up what they display in the search results as the heading for your entry and use the H1 instead. So in general, you want to make the main headline that ends up being the page title very kind of practical and what you want that page to rank for. You can put a fun one as a subheading, of course, so you get that social sharing ability. Then when if you promote this article on something like Facebook, that's the place to change that main headline over and not make it be the boring match for the search terms you want it to rank for, but use the catchy headline in Facebook so you get a lot of click through and resharing. Let's talk about social media marketing a bit. First of all, you should never paste your content directly on any of the social media channels. So don't copy the intro text for an article and paste that on Facebook and then publish it. Everything you publish to social media, you should first of all publish on your site and then share that page from your site to social media, because you want to have that link back to your website in anything that goes out on social media. That way, when lots of people see that and they interact with it or they reshare it, what Google's going to see is a whole bunch of different instances of posts that have a link in them to that same page on your site. Without that link in that post that gets reshared, Google has no idea that post is popular. So publish on your website, then share that article on each of your social media channels. And our hometown social media auto post feature does this for you automatically. Saves you a bunch of work. So the general idea is if your readers are resharing a social media post, they're also resharing a link back to your website. And that's the signal to Google that that piece of content was popular. So you're also going to get some additional traffic to your site, of course, because when those posts get reshared and somebody likes the catchy headline and the snippet, a bunch of those people are going to click through and actually go to your site and read the full article. That would be the hope. So what channels should you be publishing to in social media? And so I have a lot of clients who they don't like Facebook or they don't like Twitter or they think Instagram's a waste of time. They'll say to me, but my customers aren't on Instagram, so why should I do this? It does not matter. So every reader out there has their favorite social media platform, whether it's a good platform for it or not. If Twitter's their thing, that's where they're going all the time. If Instagram or Pinterest is their thing, it doesn't really matter whether it makes sense for your content or for your industry, etc. Publish everywhere. So the work involved with content that you put on social media is creating the content. It only takes a few seconds to copy and paste the snippet of that content and the link to the various channels. And what Google's looking for is signals on all these channels that content was popular. And so just because none of your customers are sitting on Instagram looking for pictures of high school sports, maybe they are, probably are, you want Google to see a signal that whatever it is showed up on all these channels. Sure, some of them are going to get a lot more resharing than others because it's a more natural fit. Facebook for newspapers is obviously going to be the number one, but getting a little bit of action on Pinterest and Instagram and definitely Twitter are a good signal to Google. So you've taken the time to create the content, take a little bit of extra time and publish on all of your channels. Some tips on Facebook. First of all, your followers are not going to see all of your posts. Facebook has something, the algorithm, which tries to figure out whether each of your posts is something that's likely to be popular. So they'll show it to a small subset of your followers, and then they're looking to see whether there's any engagement. So if a bunch of people comment on it, help people reshare it, and maybe Facebook has shown it to 10% of your followers, and they're seeing some good action on it, they'll share it with the next layer of the onion, so to speak. So maybe the next 10% or 15% of your followers will get it showing up in their feeds. And what you might find is a little puzzling is you'll publish a news story and get that shared out on Facebook, and it'll get a whole, say it's a Monday, and you'll get a whole bunch of engagement on Monday. And on Friday, there's another flurry of engagement from another group of people. It's not because those people weren't on Facebook all week. They were, but Facebook didn't show it to that piece of your circle of followers until Friday, because it went through 4 or 5 different ways of showing it to a bigger audience, seeing if it got engagement. If not, they let it sort of die on the line. If it got engagement, we'll then show it to that next group. So you want to get early engagement with each post you put out there. And if it's something you expect to be a big story and popular and get a bunch of shares, don't wait for it to happen all organically. Put a little bit of money on Facebook. Maybe you put, $20, $50 to boost it. $50 will usually get you in front of something like 2,000 people on Facebook. And you want to do that little spend on the big stories to get a whole bunch of engagement early on so that Facebook then rolls it out to bigger and bigger and bigger networks. Back to what we talked about, headlines. If you want that page on your site to rank, then you want that boring headline that's the facts, like, Bend High School versus Summit football score or something like that. That's not very shareable. That's not very exciting on something like Facebook. So if you want it to get clicked on and reshared, you might change that headline in Facebook so that it's a lot more, clickbait-like, a lot more interesting and catchy. So appearance on Facebook, open graph tags are something that's built into the page that tells Facebook by default what it should use for the title and what it should use for the photo. If you don't have these tags in your page, then Facebook takes a guess at what they should use. They pick what they think is probably the best photo for the page, and they pick what they think the title should be, usually from the page title. But you have the ability to control that through open graph tags. Test your page's visibility. Once you share it on Facebook, have a look at it from an end user point of view. So be logged out and go look at your logged out of Facebook and go look at your Facebook timeline and have a quick look to make sure that the headline looks good on both desktop and on a phone. You don't want stuff cut off or wrapping in strange ways where the headline doesn't make any sense. So it's always worth testing on a mobile device, which is going to be half your traffic, as well as seeing how it looks on Facebook on desktop. So log out of Facebook, make sure it's visible. Some tips on Twitter. Always use a hashtag. It's not necessarily going to drive a ton of traffic. People don't go after that, but it's expected, and you'll sometimes get some free traffic from using a hashtag, because some people are clicking on hashtags in other tweets and will end up discovering what you have. You always want to include an image. There's so much content being shared on Twitter, no matter how few people somebody follows on Twitter. There's a sea of tweets rolling by, and if your tweet about a story has no image to it, it'll get lost in the sea of much more rich and engaging and bright, shiny other tweets that are flowing by. So always have an image. If you have to have it be just the logo of your publication, that's fine as a default. But if you've got an image in the article, you definitely want that image to be used in Twitter when it's shared. Always, just like we talked about with Facebook and all the social media channels, every tweet should include a link back to the full article, because your goal is to drive traffic. You're not making money with your stuff getting shared on Twitter unless somebody gets back to your website. Tag people if they're mentioned in the story and there's somebody reasonably well known. So let's say it's the mayor or it's the school board chair or police chief or whatever it is. Tag them with their Twitter handle, and if they have a department like the Deschutes County Sheriff has a Twitter feed as well, tag them as well. That'll get it pulled into all sorts of other places and likely get those folks who have big followers to engage as well. Let's talk about Pinterest briefly. So links from pins on Pinterest show up in your Google Search Console in backlinks to your site. And so Google Search Console is the tool that webmasters are going to use to see what Google thinks of their site, see what's getting indexed, see how their search, how they're performing in search, see what's broken, see what Google can't render, all that sort of stuff. And one of the things they have in there is backlinks. Google shows links from Pinterest and Search Console. That tells you they're paying attention to it. The amount of data storage they have to store these links and then not use it makes no sense. We know that Google's using those links from Pinterest as signals for ranking. So if an article has an image, after you publish it, pin it. And you want to pin it from the page on your site. So Pinterest has a little toolbar button. If you click that toolbar button, so install that in Chrome or whatever you're using. And when you're on the page on your site for that article, you hover over the image and click the pin it button, and that will create a pin on your Pinterest board that has a link back to that article page. And that's key. If you just upload that same image to Pinterest, you get nothing. You got to have that link in it to give that popularity signal to Google. So it takes a couple of seconds, use the toolbar button, and you can pin videos as well. So if you have a video embedded page, definitely pin that. Let's talk about LinkedIn. So I would stick to mostly business kinds of news stories on LinkedIn. I wouldn't go sharing lifestyle, A&E kinds of stuff on LinkedIn. Titles on LinkedIn have to be a fair bit shorter. And so these stats I'm giving you here are from a study that found what tended to get the most traffic on LinkedIn. And so shorter titles, 40 to 50 characters, multiple images in the story. And this is surprising. The study found that if videos were embedded in a LinkedIn shared article, they didn't get nearly as much action as if there were no video. And that's kind of a surprise. Instagram, bad news about Instagram is you don't really get links from it. If you're a giant e-commerce site, you can do things to get qualified to have links to your products, but even that it's kind of a fringe thing. You get a link from your Instagram main profile page, but you're not getting links from the pictures. But it's still a good channel for brand awareness. So you might as well take anything that you've got for pictures and uploads from articles and upload those to Instagram. You're going to get some people who just love to live in Instagram, and they're going to follow you there. Let's talk about local search results. When I talked about the 3-pack, this is an example from my hometown here in Bend, Oregon. And this 3-pack, you've got the map up top with the push pins, and you got 3 newspapers here. Look at this bottom one here, Lapine, Oregon News. They didn't even capitalize their business name correctly. They have no reviews. Look how this makes them look. This stuff is all coming from your Google business profile information, and it's easy to get it right. And people, not lots of people are searching for newspapers in Bend, Oregon, but there's lots of different search terms that can cause you to show up like this. If they search for your brand name, often Google's going to pull this Google business profile information and make what they call a knowledge graph pane on the right side of the screen that has your information, and you want to look professional. So just because you're not a local business like a restaurant or a grocery store or a dentist that people are going to drive to, doesn't mean it's not important to have your business look good in Google Business Profile. So what determines whether you're going to show up in the 3-pack at all? Part of it is click history. So if Google has seen when people search for business news that people are typically clicking on local results, organic results underneath the 3-pack that are for local businesses and not the Washington Post or New York Times, that's a signal to Google that a big chunk of the users are only interested in stuff that's to do with a local business. And then they'll throw the 3-pack up. If it was presidential election news, Google's going to find that hardly anybody clicks on local results. Maybe people living in Washington, D.C., it would look local, but that's the signal to Google. Okay, this kind of news does not need a 3-pack to show up. So what gets you in the 3-pack? You got to have a verified Google Business Profile, and that's fairly basic. This is where you go to set it up. I'm sure all of you already have that set up. And this Google Business Profile got renamed, I think, a month ago. Before that, it was called Google My Business. Before that, it was called Google Places. Before that, it was Google Plus Local. Before that, it was Google Local Business Center. And I'm sure they'll rename it again in a year or two. But anyway, this is all the same thing. So recipe for getting the 3-pack, there's a few key areas that Google's going to look at. Consistent name, address, and phone number. So they want to see that name, address, phone number in the Google Business Profile data. They want to see that same name, address, phone number, exactly the same on your website that the Google Business Profile links to, and also in directories. And directories isn't just like what you might think of as business directories. Foursquare is a directory. Facebook is a directory. Dex knows, Yellow Pages, of course. And so you really need all these things to match so that Google is sure that they have the right data. They don't have a typo in the phone number, or maybe they have the old address and you updated it on your website, you forgot to update your Google Business Profile, that sort of stuff. When Google doesn't see a match between these, they'll tend to not let you show up in that 3-pack. So it's got to exactly match the data on these other directories. Links to your website help you show up in the 3-pack. So Google's just like the regular organic listings where links from other websites to your website or to your page show popularity. Same thing for the 3-pack. So links from other websites, the stronger those websites are and the more trusted they are, the better. And the number and the sentiment of reviews. So not terribly relevant here because you're not going to get very many people searching for, newspapers near me or something like that. But just so you know, that's one of the ranking factors. And maybe click-through rate within the 3-pack. I've never seen a study that proves that, but that certainly click-through rate in the regular organics does help ranking. So again, the NAP is the name, address, phone number. Google wants to see lots of confirmation they've got the right data. They look like idiots if for a local result in general, if somebody clicks on it for driving directions and ends up at your old location you haven't been to for a couple of years, or there's a typo in the phone number and they get the wrong business. So anything that gives them the clue that they might have the wrong information is you're not showing up in that 3-pack. If you're wondering how you're doing in terms of consistency in directories, this product from Moz called Moz Local. If you just Google Moz Local, or you click a link like this, click on Check My Presence, and that'll ask you to put in the business name and your address and zip, and it's going to basically go and look at a whole bunch of the directories and see whether there's alignment, whether you're in those directories at all. In this case, this business was missing from a lot. The ones that it was in, half of them had the same data as the Google Business Profile and half of them did not. So this business is not going to show up in local search for anything. Let's talk about links to the website. So it used to be for local search that what mattered was the total links flowing to your domain across all of your pages, all your articles, but that seems to have changed about 2 years ago. It seems to be links to the particular page that matters. So whether you're talking about organic search ranking or ranking the 3-pack, today it seems to be links to that page that control the strength of that ranking factor and how well you rank. If you're wondering how to check your backlinks, Moz has something called the Moz SEO toolbar. And what it does is when you have it turned on, it injects these black bars in regular search results, and you can see what the competition's link profile looks like. So here, Ben Bulletin, DA is domain authority, which is general strength of site overall. That's really good, 74 out of 100. They have 5 million links from 20,000 websites. Versus Ben Source, that's still pretty strong at 53, but it's not in the league of the Bulletin. 41,000 links versus 5 million from about 4,000 sites versus 20,000 sites. Guess why Ben Bulletin outranks Source Weekly? So how do you get backlinks? Good ways getting backlinks. Other newspapers, industry publications, business you work with, things like that. Community events pages, great source. Sponsorships. You can also get good links from paid link builders. And we're going to talk about this in just a second in a little more detail, because there's bad ways to get backlinks. A trick people used for a while was something called private blog networks, which looked like a collection of news type publications, but they all be run by the same person and they don't really have any traffic or subscribers. And those are created merely to sell links on to help other people rank. Google can figure out whether it's a private blog network or whether it's a real news site that's linking to, or a real community site. So private blog networks are bad. Comments on blogs, so putting links in blog comments on other people's blogs, that doesn't work. Those links are generally completely ignored by Google. Same thing with links from forums. There's a million directories out there, probably literally a million directories out there that are trying to sell placement in their directory so you get the link. Google knows what those are and they don't care. E-press releases used to be a good way to get links, but Google about 5 years ago came out pretty strongly against them and said, we consider it spam. So if you're trying to submit an e-press release that your promise gets republished in 100 different sites, don't send your top stories out to those kinds of things, because those 100 different sites Google knows about, and they see that happening, you can actually get a manual penalty and get your entire site banned from Google. Article marketing was a tactic that was popular maybe 8 or 10 years ago. And a lot like e-press releases, you create an article and you pay some money and they promise to republish it on a whole bunch of other websites. It looks a lot like legitimate syndication of newspaper articles that you'll see where, you know, an article in one city will be shown in, you know, another 50 or 100 cities. A lot of TV station news sites will do this, where they'll publish that same article that was sourced in Bend, Oregon, and they'll publish it in Portland, Seattle, and San Francisco, wherever else they have a presence. And that's okay, and that won't get you punished, but Google's going to ignore all but the first of those. So it's not going to do anything. Widgets is where you've got a little useful tool or graphic or something like that you get people to place on your site, and it's got a hidden link in it back to you, and your widget gets really popular. Maybe a good example of this would be weather widgets. So wonderground.com or weather.com and Weatherbug, I think is another one. They have these little widgets that you put on your website and gives the current weather for whatever you target it at, and those all had links in them back to the original sites to help them rank. Google hates that. They're not going to count them and they can get you a penalty. The other thing that could be bad is paid link builders. So there's two kinds of link builders out there, and it's kind of a gray area between. A good link builder looks a lot like a PR company. They're going to take a story, they'll come up with a story where they have a reason in it to quote you or reference an article maybe that's on your site that backs up what they're saying in this other article, and then they'll find publishers who will take that article and publish it, and there might be some money changing hands, but they're looking to publish articles on legit sites that get real readers, get real social media shares, real interaction, and they've got to do a good job of the creative coming up with a story so that the editor of that publication says, yeah, actually, I think the reader's going to like that, and we'll publish that. Bad link building is where that publisher will publish whatever you send them as long as your check clears. And Google can see the patterns. The easiest way to see the pattern and to tell if a site is selling links indiscriminately, letting anybody publish, is it'll have lots of stories on it with links to the kinds of sites that nobody wants to put links to. Online gambling, Viagra, mortgage refi, car insurance, that sort of stuff. Those are notorious for being super, super spammy. And so that's one way to quickly spot whether somebody who's offering you some sort of a partnership or ability to publish an article, whether it's any good or not. Reviews matter for local search, doesn't really matter for the regular organic search. The number of reviews and the average rating matters a little bit in rankings. This is really not going to be such a big deal for you because you're typically not going to have a ton of publications competing and not a lot of people searching for newspapers near me and things like that. Let's say reviews, do's and don'ts. Both Google and Yelp are very paranoid and concerned about fake reviews. And for good reason. There's a stat that came up maybe a year ago that said that 60% of the reviews on Amazon are fake. They're either by the seller themselves or they're negative and they're from a competitor. 60% of Amazon reviews are fake. So Google and Yelp are very sensitive to this. Don't go out there buying fake reviews. They both don't want you to reward anybody for reviews. If you do say, okay, I'm going to give you a $20 Starbucks gift card, whatever, do that in an email. Don't make that obvious on your website. Hey, review us and we'll give you want to do that sort of thing because Google will eventually spot that. The other thing is if you decide that, okay, gee, we don't look so good in the 3-pack compared to those other 2 publications in our city, we need to go and get 30 or 40 more reviews. Don't go and email 30 or 40 people all the same day. Because if Google or Yelp see that you're getting, 1 review every 6 months, and then all of a sudden you get 40 in 1 day or 3 days, they know what's going on. You ask for it, and they're going to hide all those reviews. Let's talk about search traffic sources for newspapers in general. So local search, that 3-pack we talked about, not really likely to be a big source of traffic. Certain kinds of terms it'll start to show up, but it's not probably going to be where most of your traffic comes from. It is table stakes, and because your profile is going to show up when people search for your publication name, you do want it to look good. You want it to look professional, not like that Lapine all lowercase newspaper showed up here. That's a place for reviews to make you look good. This is the interesting part, is it seems that it's quite possible that your Google business profile is a factor in determining whether or not you're eligible for Google News, for the Google local news, I should have said here. So if Google can't see where your publication is located because you don't have a Google business profile, you just look like some blog out there if you don't have that Google business profile. Whereas if you've got the business profile there and there's an address and a phone number, city, state, all that sort of stuff, now Google knows, okay, so this newspaper is in Bend, Oregon. So maybe your story about the car crash on Highway 20 is eligible for that Google News tab or the local news carousel that sometimes shows up at the top of the organic results because they know that you're local to that user. So here's an example. Les Schwab, I don't know if you folks know who Les Schwab is. It's a tire dealership here in the West Coast, I think in 4 or 5 states, probably a few hundred locations, something like that. So Burglar and Les Schwab, on any given week, there's probably some story about this someplace across here. But when I type in Burglar and Les Schwab, I got my local KTVZ news station here and Central Oregon Daily, which is published here in Bend, because Google knows from click-through patterns that people want local results. They're not looking for, I got no stories on this page. If I scroll down even further, I got no stories from Idaho or Washington or California. This is an interesting one. So if I just search for news near me, that's going to bring some search traffic. Business news near me, sports news near me, that sort of thing is going to bring you some traffic. This top stories section, it's kind of funny. So you think, okay, Google can tell where I am because I'm using my phone or I'm sitting at a computer with the IP address. They know I'm in Bend, Oregon. The two stories here, these are not in Oregon. This is South Bend. I think it's Indiana, and I forget where this is. It's the other side of the country. Why is Google showing this? Well, their way of figuring out what to show in this top stories carousel is kind of clunky. They're taking my IP address, they're figuring out I'm in Bend, and then they're looking for top stories that include the word Bend. And so that's not the right thing to do. That's not what they do in the local 3-pack. So this is kind of an interesting insight into where Google kind of trips over themselves. Now you'll notice that down here, the KTVZ news, in the regular organic results, they've got this figured out. And if I scroll down further in the page, there was nothing in the 10 organics that wasn't Bend, Oregon. So in that section of their algorithm, they're correctly figuring this out. In this top story section, if you're in Pocatello, Idaho, you're lucky because there's probably no other Pocatellos in the US and you're going to do just fine. If you're in Bend, if you're in Salem, well, there's Salem, Oregon, Salem, Massachusetts. If you're in Portland, Oregon, Portland, Maine, you could see this sort of thing happening sometimes. And that's why this is happening. Let's talk about the local news section. So this is a little different from the top story. So back here, you got this top stories mini headline in the page. This local news block that's showing up here, you're not getting that top stories thing. Sometimes you'll see the phrase local news put in here. Google's experimenting with the display all the time with this sort of stuff. So I could show you a picture of this today, and then 2 weeks from now, they'd have a different format or layout or a little subheading, that sort of thing. This is pretty good, and all the stories they're pulling up in this are from Bend, Oregon. They're not from any of the other Bends. Now, the Twitter carousel, this is an interesting one. So Google goes through this love-hate stormy affair with Twitter all the time. There'll be months when Google and Twitter are best buddies, and you'll see Twitter tweets show up at the top of search results. So this is the top of a Google search results page right here. This is not within Twitter itself. So they'll pull out news stories that they see on Twitter and put those at the very top of the page ahead of the 10 organic listings. So if Google is choosing to do that for a certain topic, you definitely want to have your news story having been tweeted, as well as having it available to show up in the 10 organic results. Because these tweeted blocks, these tweets here at the top are the very top of the page. They're going to get all the search traffic. So making sure every story you have also goes out on Twitter is pretty important, because when Google chooses just to slice it this way, this is what's going to draw the clicks, not the organic results that take somebody directly to your site. Still good for you, because somebody clicks on here and lands on Twitter, they see the little one sentence and then the link to your website, you still get the traffic. Now let's talk about the news tab of the search results. Notice up here, so when you just type in some search terms in Google and hit enter, you get the all tab, which is the regular results that you normally see. If you switch over to the news tab, what shows up here is a little bit different. To be in here, you have to be registered in the Google Publisher Center, and Google has to see you as eligible for news results. So here's what Google spokesperson actually said. They say every publisher's content is eligible if it's relevant. Well, that's kind of like hand-wavy vague, right? The key is this next sentence. Publishers with more expertise, authority, and trustworthiness for a given topic or location will rank accordingly. So there's two things being said there. Expertise, authority, and trust, we're going to talk about in a second. It's a big ranking factor that started with the MEDDIC update to Google in August 2018. But the or location is key here. So if there's a story about, remember when people took over the Malheur Reserve here and the FBI came in, that went on for a while. As a Bend newspaper, because you're not near Malheur, you're in Oregon, you're not going to have much authority compared to the Burns, Oregon newspaper, which is a 20-minute drive from where this happened. And so your location can matter, but also the general expert authority and trust signals. And I'll explain what those are. So In these local news ranking factors, first of all, you've got to be submitting your RSS feeds in Google Publisher Center. If you haven't done that already, if you just do a search for Google Publisher Center, you'll find that. And the RSS feed is basically the programmer's view of the headlines and snippets and links for each of your news categories on your site. So those will be being generated for you automatically. The next ranking factor is the newspaper publishing it local to the user or to the story? EAT is expertise, authority, and trust. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a second. And then other ranking factors are the usual Google ranking factors. So links to the page, links to the site. Does the page title have the keywords that were searched for? Is the content high quality? Is there a lot of text or a little? Are there original images? Is there embedded video? All that sort of stuff. And then schema markup. Schema markup is some hidden code within an HTML page for any page on your website that tells Google, hey, this page is about an article, and the headline of the article is Malheur Wildlife Refuge occupation, whatever happens to be. And then the author of it is Joe Smith, reporter. And then within that markup, it can say Joe is also the guy that has this bio page on our newspaper site and was a guest columnist over this other site and used to write for the Portland Oregonian over here. And here's his LinkedIn, and here's his Facebook, and here's his Twitter. When Google sees that, they're going, oh, so this Joe actually is somebody notable, versus if the article is written by Bend Bulletin staff, that's not a real person. That doesn't have any credibility. That's some intern flunky that you hired, right? So that schema markup has a big impact when Google's looking at expertise, authority, and trust to say, who wrote this? And does this person know anything about this topic? So more detail about what EAT is, stands for expertise, authority, and trust. And this became a factor in summer of 2018. Google cares about who wrote the article and what does that author know about the topic. So let's say that that markup we talked about for that author has a link in the markup. It's called a same as link to their LinkedIn page. And their LinkedIn page, let's say the article is about something at the Malheur Wildlife Refuge. And their LinkedIn page has stuff on it about Audubon Society and about a book that they published on birds and something about Oregon. Now Google's saying, okay, this article about the wildlife refuge in Oregon is written by this guy who also lives in Oregon and knows something about birds and et cetera, that sort of stuff. So that's the connections Google's trying to draw with that. So profiles for that author on other websites. And the profile doesn't have to be just like a bio page about them. It could be, if they wrote a book and that book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Goodreads, those profiles are clues to Google that person is notable about whatever that book is about. Because those are very, very strong domains, Goodreads and Barnes & Noble, Amazon, of course. And that's a very strong indicator, especially if that page with the book on it has a bunch of the same sort of words as the page Google's trying to decide whether it should rank. That tells Google that, okay, the guys seem to write a book about the same sort of stuff. And so they're doing a little mechanical programmatic matching of this to see whether that should give them any credibility. Now, if the article is about the wildlife refuge and the link is to a book about motorcycles, okay, that's not going to give you any branding points because there's no overlap. The Amazon book about motorcycles that I wrote says I know something about motorcycles, doesn't say I know anything about birds. Who published the article? So this is about the authority of your newspaper website in general. And so there's schema markup that you can put in each page for your organization. And typically there you're going to have these same as links pointing at your LinkedIn and your Facebook and your Twitter and your Pinterest and your Instagram. So all your social media profiles. If you have other profiles on other organization sites like newspaper association sites where your publication name is mentioned, I would include those, that sort of thing. So the other thing is what else has that organization published on the topic? So if I'm the Bend Bulletin and we publish 5 stories about that Malheur occupation, the 6th story we publish, Google is aware that we've got a bunch of other content on the site that's very similar. Much more likely to rank than the first story we write about it. And then the same old ranking factor that affects page rank, like forgetting expertise, authority, and trust. But what sites are linking to this page, to this website, to this author's profile, and all those sites' authorities in the space. And Google's going to determine authorities based on how strong is the domain and what are the topics that other website that links to you cover. All right, ready for Q&A. We've got a bunch of questions in here. Matt, do you want me just to start with the questions I've seen in the spreadsheet?
Yeah, I think so. We tried to order them best we could. If you want to start off with the question from Will, he submitted beforehand.
Okay. So that question is, what can I do to make it so the news stories I put on my website, fordcountychronicle.com, show up on Google News? Nothing's showing up for some reason. So back to one of those last couple of slides, I talked about the expertise, authority, trust, and links. So Will, one thing I noticed is your domain authority on your site, I think it was a 12 when I looked at it. That's not very high. You need to build that with, you might have to do some paid link building. I like a company called SEO.co. They do a real good job of legit publication on really strong sites. So you might do a little bit of paid link building to build up that. The other thing I'd say is I noticed a lot of really weak spammy sites linking to your site. That can bring down Google's trust in you. If it looks like you've been paying people in India to build cheapo links to your website, even if not your fault, it happened 10 years ago, whatever, you really want to get rid of those with something called a disavow file, where you're basically telling Google, okay, I realize I have links from all these terrible places. Don't count them against me anymore. The other thing is make sure, of course, your Google business profile is set up with a link to your site. When Google sees your domain, your homepage, and your Google business profile, and that's matching exactly the homepage of your site, then they can put 2 and 2 together and go, okay, so this website here is in Bend, Oregon at this address on Elm Street or whatever it happens to be. So it makes that tie. And then schema markup on your site for organization that says we are the Bend Bulletin and we're at 123 Main Street, Bend, Oregon, 97701. That schema markup that's hidden on your page, the markup's hidden. You probably also have that address in your footer and your contact page and things like that. But that markup on your page helps as well. So you want Google to know absolutely where you're located, so that for local news stories, you're a good source. And then you want a stronger backlink profile to make you look more authoritative.
Quick follow-up for you on this. I just Googled Ford County Chronicle, and I see them at the top, but I don't see a Google business profile.
Okay, that's a good clue right there. If Google knew to draw the connection between your Google business profile and your website, that should be showing up on the right. So either you don't have one, or maybe there's some data inconsistency where they're going, we're not sure these are the same one.
Right.
You change your domain name, or maybe you don't have the domain name listed in your Google My Business. It could be something like that.
Right. Yeah, it could be something really basic like that, Will. And we've been working with a lot of customers lately on just getting that all straightened away. For Google Business Profile, you just need a Gmail account. You can create one for free with Google, and it could just be the newspaper name at Gmail. But you need something to actually start that claim process. And they'll send you a postcard to a physical address to verify all that. So it's very easy once you get in there.
Next question. Why is it that Google won't allow the use of my cell phone as my newspaper's main phone number, which it is? Right. So they shouldn't be, there's not a general rule in Google Business Profile to not use cell phones. I have tons of clients that are using their cell phones. So it's not the fact that it's a cell phone. There's something else going on. It might be that Google sees you in South Bend, Indiana, and the area code on your cell phone is 503 from when you used to live in Portland. And Google might be going, I don't think that's really a business in South Bend, Indiana. I've seen people use out of area code phone numbers, seem to get away with it, but it could be that it got flagged for that and they won't allow it. If you want to figure out what's going on there, 2 things to try. 1, tweet at Google My Biz, B-I-Z, and ask, and they'll ask you to then send them a direct message. You follow them and send a direct message, and then you get some help out of them that way. The other thing is, if you do have a listing up there and it just won't show that phone number, won't allow you to show that phone number, search for yourself. And when you get that knowledge graph result with just you on the right, there's a send feedback link. And I've gotten pretty good turnaround, one or 2 day turnaround from that send feedback link. Now, just a heads up, they have a giant team of support people who are chasing down issues like this, and not all of them are rock stars. You've got a bunch of bozos out there, and you may have to repeat your question 3 or 4 times or ask for escalation to somebody more senior. I swear the number one thing they're teaching those people as they're bringing them on by the hundreds is to turn down every request, because everybody's trying to spam them or hack them or whatever it is. And so sometimes you got to push real hard to get anything changed. Sample of schema markup. Yeah, let me show you.
Okay, cool.
So here's a travel website I have. So this is a tester which reads that hidden schema markup from the page, just like Google does. And so here I've got schema for corporation that says this is the business, this is the business on LinkedIn, Crunchbase, SlideShare, YouTube channel, all that. This is a schema that tells Google, hey, Google, there's a video embedded in the page that's about, here's the name, best time of year to go to Tahiti. That's my target term for the page. And then all this other stuff here. And then articles, the other interesting one. And this is where that expertise, authority, and trust comes in. So see this author element here? You folks can all see my screen, right, still?
Yep.
Okay. This author here, a real name, all these same as links. Basically, these are my other profiles around the planet. So social media, of course, LinkedIn. My Moz community profile is pretty strong because I've done a bunch of Whiteboard Fridays and main blog posts. SlideShare is good. My Rotary Club, I'm on the board there. Search Engine Land, there was an article written about me there. I used to be on the board of this, et cetera, et cetera. Crunchbase. So when Google looks at this, they're going to look at each of these other pages and say, what does that page say Michael's an authority in? Now, I used to have one I did some articles on motorcycle.com. And that's the example I use for a same as link that doesn't help. So these are all telling Google really that I'm good at SEO, because most of these pages are about SEO. But my LinkedIn also mentions my travel websites. Bright Yonder is another travel website. My Pinterest page has a board that's just has a whole bunch of boards about different kinds of travel. Tidings, that's not going to be too relevant. Crunchbase is going to talk about travel. So some of these are going to show Google that I have some credibility in the travel space. A bunch of them are going to show I have credibility in the SEO space. But I don't want to leave those out because those are so strong. I might not get as much relevance brownie points from a link from Moz, but Moz is domain authority 95 out of 100 or something like that. So the fact that Moz has a profile for me is a good credibility signal. Potential negative to sharing anywhere is the next question. For example, sharing on a platform with little to no audience and getting zero engagement. If the platform is a big platform, I think you should share anyway. So let's say you really don't get much engagement on Pinterest. I wouldn't expect it. You might on certain topics, maybe if you have an arts and entertainment section, you might get some sharing there. But Google understands that, each industry, each topic is going to tend to have, a big bump on one of the social media platforms and less on the others. So I don't think there's any downside to sharing on all of them. What you really don't want to have happen, though, is on all the social media platforms, you get crickets every time you share something. And so the best way to make that problem go away is to do a boosted post on Facebook and, put $20 behind it and it'll get out in front of a bunch of people. It's inexpensive and you'll get some of that going on. And that'll also help you build followers. And so Google will see some sort of buzz. And keep in mind, what you're looking to do is you don't have to outdo Washington Post, New York Times, things like that. You just have to outdo your competitors. So if you're getting, if Google in 1 month sees 10 links from different Facebook timelines back to your site and sees 3 from your competitor, you're killing it.
Follow up on that, Michael.
Yeah.
You mentioned boosting posts. I think for Facebook, at least when you're creating an ad from nothing, you have different campaign options, right? Yeah. Different objectives. You can get clicks or views or likes. Is there one that's better for boosting posts?
So there's 2 schools of thought here. On the one hand, you make money when people land on your site and you get more ad impressions, things like that. So a goal of clicks is pretty good. Right. Views is good if what you're trying to do is get it reshared.
Right.
So either of those is going to be good, and you can experiment and see what ends up getting you more sharing. And it's going to vary. You'll do one article, you'll post that and do one thing, and you'll think, hey, this worked out. I've got the ticket figured out. Next one you put up, you should have done the other. So,
Right.
So it's a bit of a trial and error there.
Okay. Got it.
Next question, links and blog comments, Google ignores. So they ignore it for calculation of page rank. And page rank is one of the ranking factors. However, a couple of things to note. So first of all, Google doesn't look at traffic to your site. Google Analytics is owned by Google, of course, and Google Analytics knows about traffic to your site. But in terms of search ranking, there's nothing I've seen that tells me that Google cares about what they see in Google Analytics. One of the reasons is that a lot of sites don't have Google Analytics on it, so they wouldn't get data on everything to you'd be able to compare two sites for a ranking signal. The other thing is that Google Analytics numbers are so easily faked. If you want to look up an interesting story, Google referral spam. And there's a Russian guy that I think he went to jail for doing this. It was spamming all websites, making it look like you were getting traffic from social media sharing widgets. So that you go, wow, this must be really powerful. You click through and buy his widget. It's so easy. I could turn around and take any of your sites and show you 1 million visitors all to one page tomorrow, and Google Analytics would gobble it up and report it like it was the truth. So traffic to the site, Google doesn't care about. Google does care about clicks from search results to your site. So if they show you for business news, Bend, Oregon, in the search results 100 times in position 2 or position 3 in the organics, and nobody ever clicks on you out of 100 times, that's a signal to them is that for whatever reason, that wasn't the right answer. So like those top stories, which were showing South Bend instead of Bend, Oregon, if nobody's going to click on that because that wasn't what they're looking for, after a while, Google will figure that out and they'll stop doing that. So traffic is not a factor. Originally, blog comments and Facebook links and tweets and all that were ignored by Google because it was so easily gamed. You could write a little script that go and post 100 million blog comments, all with a link back to your site across 100 million different blogs. And everybody knew how to do that. And so it was game to death. So Google said, well, we're not discounting any of that. And so those are all ignored. What happened about a year and a half ago? So Google has a special hidden tag that you as a blog platform or as a forum platform or a newspaper with comment sections on pages, whatever it is, are supposed to do is mark anything that you, the publisher, can't vouch for as a link with a rel no follow tag. And that tells Google's like, hey, I don't know where this came from. Don't blame it on me. That's not me endorsing wherever this user is linking to. So that started with rel equals no follow. A year and a half ago, Google came out with a recommendation for all publishers that said, hey, if it's user-generated link, mark it with rel UGC for user-generated content. And if it's a paid ad, mark it with rel sponsored. The only reason they're doing that is they care about counting ad links separately from real user-generated content. And that's the clue to us that they figured out how to spot that mass spamming of blog posts. And basically, all they have to do is look at if the same text in the blog post, in the blog comment that links to a site, exact same text is on 1,000 different websites. Okay, that's clearly automated and not legit. If on the other hand, there's 100 links from different blogs to a certain piece of content on your site, and 20 links in Reddit, and 3 in Quora, and 5 in Yahoo Answers, and all that sort of stuff, and each one has different words around it, but it's the same link, that's real, that's legit. That is social media buzz. It's not Facebook or Twitter, but it's still a kind of social media. So that, I believe Google's looking at lots of places for that sort of a signal. Certainly they'll be looking at Reddit and Quora and comments on places like Medium and all the big ones, Google Groups, Yahoo Answers, things like that. My guess is any place they find rel equals UGC on links, they're going to treat that like social media shares. They'll run it through their filters, see if it's spam. If it's not spam, they're going to count as like, hey, there is a lot of buzz, not just on Facebook and Twitter, but there's buzz on Quora and on this, this sports car forum and that, Medium article on something, whatever it is. So that can actually help.
I got a quick question here, Mike. I want to just direct this a little bit. Could you do me a favor and do a quick demo for us? I think this will answer a couple questions. Just pull up another Google search and look for the Bend bulletin. Couple things I wanted to just ask. Have you heard of this, about this result thing? You see right next to the top result, there's 3 dots there.
I'm gonna turn off this mouse toolbar here.
Oh, yeah. And then this, I just noticed this today.
Yeah, so this came out maybe a month or 2 ago.
Okay.
And so Google has this kind of project they've been working on for a few years. I forget what they exactly call it. Some places they call it entities. Some places, they surface that in what they call a knowledge graph, where you get the panel over on the right, which is what's happening here. Right. So that's what's going on there. The about this result is supposed to be there to help people decide whether they can trust it or not. So I think the genesis of this was a lot of the fake news getting spread around by publications that weren't actually publications. Right. They were spun up just to try to promote whatever story or view or whatever it happened to be. So that's what's going on there.
And the other thing about this that was weird, and I've seen this for a few papers, is you've got a Wikipedia result on the right there instead of a Google My Business. So 2 questions there. Creating Wikipedia pages for a newspaper, is that something that should be done, could be done? Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah. So on the right, this is called the knowledge panel, and the knowledge panel can come from different sources. Wikipedia is the source of an awful lot of it. And the reason for that is probably mostly that it's really hard to get into Wikipedia unless you're really quite notable. So if Google has a Wikipedia entity they know is tied to the search term, they're usually going to show that over the Google business profile. Right. Now, getting into Wikipedia is a royal pain. It's a toxic, incestuous, gamed, mafia kind of place. If you have a buddy who's an editor, you can get stuff done. If your client that you're trying to get in there, or your publication trying to get in there, if somebody who's the official editor of that section has somebody who's a competitor or doesn't like you, they'll come up with all sorts of excuses why you can't be published, why you're not notable, you don't deserve a Wikipedia page, and it's just a royal mess.
Gotcha.
So it's strong. Google still cares about it, but don't feel bad if you try to get a Wikipedia page created for yourself and you're banging your head against the wall and nothing happens, because it can be really, really challenging. Right. Generally, to get a Wikipedia page about your business, you need to be not associated with the business. So not to throw extra work on Matt's plate, but Matt would be a good example of somebody, if he became an editor, could get Wikipedia pages for the newspapers. But I guarantee you, Heidi Wright, who I know here in Bend, she's in my Rotary Club. Heidi Wright didn't create this page about the bulletin and in the Wikipedia. They never. That's the first thing they flagged is this about yourself?
Oh, 100%. And this is actually something we've talked about internally. So I'll just say it right now. Any of our hometown customers that want to try this, we will put the time into submitting to Wikipedia. We'll just need some details from you on the paper, but we will chase this because I want to learn about it. One other quick question, Mike. This is from an attendee. How should we handle Facebook Live events? Any way to get noticed by Google for this?
So that's a tough one. So a Facebook Live event is typically going to show up in your news feed, and it's going to show up like as a user logged in. Google doesn't see that. Google sees what's on your timeline. It should show up in your timeline as well. But you don't generally have a link in there. So I'm not sure Google's going to follow that whole chain of a popular live event and that belongs to this Facebook profile, which has a link back to your homepage in it. Maybe. But I think that's a challenge. Somebody asked, what's a website for SEO code? The tool is called the Moz Pro Toolbar. And when you install it, it puts this little black bar at the bottom of the page, and it inserts these black bars with link metrics everywhere. I think there's a free version of this, but it doesn't have all the stats. I have a paid version because I use it every single day, a dozen times a day or more. Then you get more stats. And if you're logged into your little Moz account, then it'll inject these stats here. This is tremendously valuable for figuring out why somebody else outranked you. It's not always the domain authority or the links to the page authority, but very often it is. So that's the Moz Pro toolbar. For the schema validator, if you just Google schema validator, I guarantee you'll get that. Schema tester, that's the one. Validator.schema.org is what you're looking for.
And actually, Jenny just clarified something for me. She was asking about a link to get paid backlinks.
Yeah. SEO.co. So these folks are legit. I've used them with a ton of clients, had great results. They do the writing of the article. And so they're not writing a puff piece about, your reporter or your newspaper or anything like that. What it is they're writing a legit article about something where you've written an article, you have a published article about that as well. And so they want a soundbite quote from that reporter.
Right.
And then you can link back to the article that reporter did on it. So that's the sort of thing they're going to do.
Okay. Well, I think we got all the questions answered. So Michael, thank you so much again for your time. I really appreciate you doing this for us.